welcome to XReality Podcast. I am the host, Dominique Wu, and beside me is the guest, Professor Bob Stone. Hi, Professor Bob. Would you share a little bit about your background with us?
Yes, sure, Dominic. Thank you for inviting me on. This is a great pleasure. Um, so I'm Bob Stone, Professor Bob Stone. I'm an emeritus professor. I actually retired in 2019, but I'm still involved with the University of Birmingham as an emeritus in XR, human factors. I would try to make this painlessly brief because I've been involved in the virtual reality XR community now for 38 years. So I can talk forever. But my first experience of XR was when my team and I were doing some work for the European Space Agency. And I managed to cut a long story short to get to a conference in the States and then to visit the Virtual Environment Laboratory at NASA in California, NASA Ames. That changed my life. That completely changed my life. I came back to the UK. I jumped a job into the UK's National Robotics Centre, where we did a lot of looking at technology convergence between VR and telepresence, telerobotics. We then became a small commercial company. So my career is roughly 50% in government centres, I suppose you describe it, and commercial, because I was a director of a virtual reality company up until 2003, when I decided to then go into academia to try and motivate students and to get all the crazy projects that I thought about over the years, try to get them to come to reality. So as I say, it's been 38 years. My favorite virtual reality or XR applications, I mean, most of my team have been kept alive, kept in a job because of our defense work over the years, more recently defense healthcare, which we can talk about later. But my number one passion is heritage, how we can capture heritage that may be long gone, that may be invisible because of things that have grown around it, and to make the invisible visible. That's my catchphrase. And to take all that to maybe local villages, local towns, and try to get it exposed to people of all ages to make them aware of the real world. So again, as I say, it's making the invisible visible, and that's very recently been my passion in XR.
Wow. Yeah. So I heard that you mentioned a lot of your projects, and would you mind sharing with us your most the project that you did recently, and what types of interesting insights you find out in this project?
Yeah, I think our most recent major project has been with the Defence Medical Academy, or the UK's Defence Medical Services. So this is a branch of the Ministry of Defence that looks after all the young boys and girls who are paramedics and go out onto the battlefield to save lives. Now, I've been working with the defence medical people since I joined the university. It was one of the reasons I really wanted to go to Birmingham, because Birmingham is also the home, or was the home, to the Royal Centre
Wow.
for Defence Medicine. And we've done a number of projects. We've looked at, for example, using virtual reality scenes of nature to help people recover mentally. Also to do again getting exercise in virtual nature scenes. But then about 6 years ago, we're working on a training project to look at how virtual reality could help these young guys train, for example, in the back of a helicopter. So what we did was we managed to obtain a lifelike human mannequin, and we were using virtual reality to try and simulate the inside of a helicopter. But when you reached out with your virtual hands to touch the virtual body, you would actually touch the real body. Now that didn't work. It didn't work at all well because there were lots of things like your hands disappearing into the image. So what we did, and we were the first people to do this long before Vario came out with their XR1, XR3, XR4 headsets. We were the first people to try pass through.
Hmm.
So we took an HTC Vive Pro
Hmm.
and we put an industrial camera on the front,
Wow.
and we used green screen. In fact, we used blue screen chroma key, and all of a sudden you could see your real hands. So there was no need for haptics.
Wow.
I am not a fan. I am not a fan of haptics, but you could see your hand and the virtual, the real human model, but everything else was virtual. So you're inside a virtual helicopter with the sound. You could look out of the window, but when you touched the casualty, which is the main part of train, then you actually felt that you were touching something real,
Wow.
and you could see your colleagues. That was something I'd always wanted to do ever since the late 1990s when we were doing other defense work where we were trying to mix the real with the virtual. But it was only at that point that we suddenly found that by using this pass-through technique, we could generate a whole new mixed reality.
Oh.
And since then, we have been looking at that because it overcomes a lot of the human sense problem or sensory problems, particularly in touch, and particularly in manual skills. So we learned a lot from doing very simple, very unimpressive early work, but then it became this medical emergency response team project became very important because suddenly you didn't need necessarily to get them into a real helicopter or a real
Hmm.
ship or a real submarine. You could do it. You could do it using mixed reality.
Hmm. Wow. So, when you use like a mixed reality in defense, can you give us like a, for example, like the scenario that the, for example, pilot or somebody use this technology and accomplish something that they couldn't accomplish in the past?
Yeah, I mean, the medical training one is a good one because when you're in mixed reality, you can do all kinds of things. You can simulate the helicopter by being hit by
Oh,
fragments from weapons. You can simulate the engine failing. You can simulate flares going off. You can put the students into all kinds of applications, all kinds of scenes that they would not normally have if they went out and trained for real. Similarly, with a another project we did, which was kind of virtual, which is kind of mixed reality, which is training the young air crew who go into the back of a helicopter how to talk to the pilot. So imagine if you've got a helicopter. Well, in fact, you can't see it, but I've got a model of the helicopter. Where is it? Is it up there? Yeah, it's there.
wow, that's very
So this one
cool.
here,
Wow.
this was the helicopter we were working on,
Wow.
and the air crew stands in the back and talks to the pilot as the helicopter is trying to land in very confined spaces.
Hmm.
What we found was that if you designed it so it was the side, it felt like the side of a helicopter,
Oh,
the handholds were in the right position,
yeah.
and various other physical features were available,
Hmm.
then you could build the virtual world around that and train them
Wow.
how to use parts of the real helicopter to make an accurate landing in the virtual forest. So again, it comes back to something I know when you first contacted me, we discussed things like human factors, but
Yeah.
it's all about working with the people who are going to be doing the job.
Hmm.
And once you do that, and we have various processes for doing that, you can then identify what are the most important parts of their training,
Hmm.
which are best served by real physical equipment,
Hmm.
and which are best served by virtual reality. And then you blend the two
Hmm.
using pass through, chroma key, pass through cameras, and so on.
Hmm. Yeah. Wow. So pretty much you use like the training, like a mixed reality or virtual reality to train students for them to immerse themselves and then learn more. Because, for example, like I remember in education there was a kind of like a theory which is multimedia. So
Mm.
students learn more by putting things in the spatial area and also different types of like a sensory, like eyes, hands, hearing. Yeah. So you mentioned about like a mixed reality medical emergency, the project, and what else do you see like this types of things that really helps student besides the learning? And I saw you said that it's for example like what do you see this can help like for example medical, and also you said that defense, so how can this become an experience, and also how can people work on it? You mentioned it's a recent project. How, like how what's the size of people, like how many people work on it, and do you guys use like for example AI, or what types of tools you kind of like people work for this project?
Right, but we've always had a small team. The team up until recently, they were working on the on that medical project. There was only three of us,
Wow.
which we've always had a small team. We've never had very much money. So I mean, I always, if I see if I see things on LinkedIn, for example, where they say we've just got so many millions of pounds, I've never had £1 million. Most of our contracts have been maybe a few tens of thousands of pounds. The medical project was maybe 100,000 more than that, but we never have an enormous amount of money, so we have to be very efficient with how we spend our budgets.
Mm.
AI is an interesting one for me. I mean, I'm not. It's not my particular area of expertise. I do see areas where AI and XR will converge in the future. From the medical point of view, one of the things I would be very keen on investigating is the use of AI to help the trainers, the instructors, to understand what's going on in the mind of their trainees. So, for example, if we have an AI system that can integrate measures of stress, so for example, eye gaze, pupil diameter, skin response, maybe brainwaves, EEG, and other metrics of stress and performance. How can AI be used to integrate and display that to an instructor so they can make an almost an instantaneous decision as to what in that real world is causing the student to perform like that. Sometimes they get distracted. Why are they distracted? There's so many things going on
Yeah.
that the instructor, just if you give the instructor a screen, they can't see everything. But
Mm.
if we're monitoring, for example, eye movement, hand movement, levels of stress, levels of mental attention, then, and that's being displayed in a meaningful form to the trainer, then that's where I see AI making an impact here. And I think that's important because all too often people think about the trainee, but they don't think about the trainer as
Mm.
well. And they're both as
Oh,
important when it
yeah.
comes to designing XR.
Wow. So you think that AI is help to kind of gather the data of how trainees' emotional statement for people to better understand the behavior and psychology behind the technology part, which,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I think as we're seeing big developments in human sensing. So things, as I mentioned, things like skin response, things like brainwave recording, and being able to filter out noise from muscles, noise from other systems, and to be able to indicate mental workload. And I think this is where AI can help enormously because the human simply cannot process that amount of information in enough time to make a judgment as to whether that trainee is good enough to go out into the real world or needs more work. So I see AI as that's one of the areas in XR where I think AI will really be able to help in the near term, in the near future.
Yeah, yeah. I think AI, especially to kind of like a censoring people's behavior, and also help the trainers to understand more. And also, I think a generative AI can really help accelerate the production of
Mm,
the from the creator's point perspective. I think those are also really help accelerating the kind of the AI combined with XR. Those I would say conversion technology.
mm.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And you also mentioned that the healthcare from heritage. Can
Mm.
you describe or give us some background of what you are working on and what types of interesting, insightful things that you discovered?
Yeah. We I suppose it would be back in again in the 2000s, the noughties, where one of my Chinese students and I went to the West Country to create a virtual reality model of a place that's very close to my heart, a place called Wembury, and he did a fantastic job. And what we did after he created this beach scene with, it was amazing. Coming from China, he had never seen the ocean. He
What?
had and when I took him
Interesting.
and got him out of the car and he saw the ocean for the first time, it was
Wow.
incredible.
Wow.
So he did a wonderful job in recreating this scene, and we took it into various hospitals, and we had possibly four PhD students working on the scene
Mm,
to look at how you could use that scene of nature, to rehabilitate physically and mentally hospitals who either could not or would not go to those areas. And there are a lot of places in the UK where we have city hospitals
yeah.
where the views are just concrete and glass, and it's just like you got a view onto a city. So we thought, can we bring nature into the hospitals?
Mm.
And we've looked at using it for example, recovery of leg function
Oh, wow.
for people who've had injuries, recovery of lung capabilities, so lung and diaphragm capabilities. We've investigated its impact on sleep, particularly in intensive care, and we've been developing this over many years. But the biggest problem always is that it takes you a long time and quite a lot of money to build these scenes. I mean, we're talking
Mm,
about the countryside, we're talking about the sea, we're talking about trees, we're talking about, and that's quite difficult to do. We haven't got many people who can put something together really quickly.
yeah.
So what we started to do was we started to look at, could we use other technologies to create a kind of virtual reality experience
Mm.
using 360 cameras, 360
Oh,
video cameras, and also 3D scanners such as
mm,
the Matterport, the LiDAR, and laser scanners, because they would help us capture scenes much faster than going out and building everything from in 3D.
mm,
And so the heritage work that we do now transfers over to healthcare in a number of ways. So just give you a couple of examples. One of my students, a lovely student who was doing her master's with me, Elsa, she and I worked together on a mountain scene. So
mm,
it's like an alpine scene from Switzerland.
mm,
And we were doing this with a lovely lady who was a palliative care end of life specialist,
mm,
and she had managed to get the voice of Sir David Attenborough, the
mm,
great Sir David Attenborough, to talk through a relaxation program or
mm,
relaxation session. So when you put the headset on, and we're not talking about anything expensive. We use the HTC Vive Flow headsets. They're quite low in price, but they're absolutely perfect. You hear David Attenborough talking to you in his lovely voice,
Yeah.
and the scene changes. So it goes from daytime to nighttime, northern lights,
Oh,
back to daytime again, and people spend 12 minutes in this student developed
wow.
alpine scene. And when they come back to the real world, they're like, wow, I feel so good.
Yeah.
This is fantastic. So it's a 360 it's a 360 project, but it has a major impact. And so
Mm,
from then we started doing crazy stuff. So
yeah.
for example, on my YouTube site, you will see 360 videos from the front of steam trains, old
Wow.
British steam trains.
Huh,
So it's when you put the headset on, it makes you think as if you're sitting on the front of the train,
huh.
and you can see the beach, and you can see the countryside, and you can see this blue sky, and some beautiful countryside scenes. 2 years ago, it was my and my wife's 30th anniversary.
Hmm.
She got me the most fantastic present, which was a trip in a Spitfire aircraft. I mean,
Wow.
because the Spitfire is like an iconic. Well, so we recorded that as well using
Yeah.
360, and
Hmm.
today I take that to hospices,
Hmm.
care homes, hospitals, and when the senior citizens, the old folks, put this headset on, they find themselves in the cockpit of a Spitfire, flying across the countryside. And the impact it's had, this heritage, the impact it's had on their healthcare, making them talk, making them discuss their past, making them interact with other people, has been fabulous. So just by doing 360 views of the beach, of the countryside, of all sorts of things, we can then take that into these old people's homes, and we can make their day. We can give them a little bit of fun that also has some history that they can talk to us about.
Hmm.
So that's why I said early on, the heritage and the healthcare from heritage is my number one passion, because it's the one thing we've done,
Hmm.
the one thing that I've done in the past 38 years of being involved in virtual reality that has the greatest visible impact
Hmm.
on people who need it most. And
Wow.
yeah, in fact, it's very just earlier today, I was doing something similar in our local town centre for
Hmm.
people to come in and just
Wow.
chill for 10, 12 minutes, listening to Sir David Attenborough.
Wow. So pretty much, David Attenborough, kind of make it like an introduction for the environment and also the kind of like something in the past or some climate change stuff. Can you give us some like, for example, what types of content, and also, is there any like any player or anybody mention like, wow, this experience change something in their life? Is there any kind of like scenarios or any stories you want to share?
Well, I mean, certainly the Spitfire flight is probably the best one, because it's very expensive to get a Spitfire flight, even for 30 minutes.
Wow.
But some of the old people who remember the Second World War, and remember seeing real Spitfires flying
Wow.
over their gardens. That got them to talk about their experiences. Climate change is an interesting one. We've not done any formal research on this, but being able to capture areas and locations that are very fragile, that may be deteriorating or disappearing because of climate change. Um, we did a project which simulated a wreck under sea, and we used artificial life to simulate the behavior of a marine ecosystem on the
Wow.
back of the ship.
Wow.
Oh, connection. Sorry, I'll just pause there because it just said internet's unstable. Are you still there?
Oh, yeah, I'm still
You are
here.
still there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I
Okay,
can hear
right.
you.
I'll just take a gap and try again because my internet went unstable. As far as climate change is concerned, we did a project where we simulated a part of a ship that had been turned into an artificial reef. And so on the back of the ship, on the stern of the ship, I should say, was this simulated ecosystem which we simulated using artificial life. And then children could experiment with changing the temperature of the water. So, for
Mm.
example, what we found was with numerous children that they would recall and be able to discuss more about climate change if they were able to see the effect of changing the seawater temperature in virtual reality would change the different ways in which the ecosystem would thrive or die, the different ways in which some of the, for example, the sea urchins would not eat as much of the algae, and this would have a knock-on effect to other species. So yes, climate change and virtual reality there is a strong link there, but certainly in terms of the impact on real people, yes, we've witnessed elderly people, but from their healthcare nurses who also like to. But when they've had a go, they feel much more relaxed and much more capable to take on the rest of the day. So
Wow.
it does have a positive impact.
Wow. So you mentioned that for climate change, it really helps people to perceive how the world start changing, and also the kind of like a healthcare. You mentioned a lot of healthcare that really helps people to ready to take the next challenge. So I think
Yes.
I would say mixed reality. Or VR really helps changing, I would say, the behavior or refreshing our kind of anxiety to towards more positive way. And also, yeah, so for we talk a lot about more like a healthcare and also more like a heritage side, and also like for example pilot part. And you before you mentioned that you have some like a interesting way of I don't know, like a space, right? So
Mm.
can you talk about that project like with like a Russian?
Oh, the Russian the Russian connection is quite interesting. It goes back many years. But when I was with the National Robotics Center in the north of the country, we met a couple of Russian people at a conference, and we started becoming very friendly, and we would interact quite a lot. And they invited me over to Moscow, and they took me to see the cosmonaut training center.
Mm.
And what we did was we actually helped them using a British virtual reality toolkit called
Wow.
Superscape,
Wow.
which in the 1990s was a very popular desktop VR package. We used that to build with them to build a model of the very early Mir space station. And it's so transpired. We found out at a conference later that what we did was the first introduction of virtual reality into the Russian space training program, which is like, wow, that's absolutely incredible. And and this was quite good because back in 1987, when I first experienced virtual reality at NASA, that was space related. Then the Russian work came along, that was space related. And today, we're looking at how we can improve future astronaut training, again, using mixed reality. And I mean, one of the projects that I'm working on is looking at how we can take an industrial robot,
mm,
and we can use that industrial robot almost as a fairground ride to simulate on Earth the movements that an astronaut would need to take, but then using mixed reality to create the illusion that the astronaut is in space. Now, there's an internationally well-known company, robot company called KUKA, and KUKA have built something called the KUKA Coaster, and the KUKA Coaster is exactly what I was thinking of. It's a fairground ride. So two people will sit on the end of this big industrial robot, and they'll be spinning around, obviously they'll be screaming and they'll be enjoying themselves. So my thinking is, well, that's good because that means it already exists. It means that the safety case for interacting between humans and robots that already exists. So the work we've been doing is looking at developing 3D concept scenarios. And in fact, my youngest son, who is just behind that door behind me, is working on one. He's working on one even now. We're looking at how, if we could suitably develop this concept, I actually believe we could do away with the need to have these big water tanks, these big swimming pools that they put astronauts into, which are incredibly expensive, require very sophisticated infrastructure, safety by using divers, and so on and so on. But I think that this new concept for space training could replace the need for these. They call it neutral buoyancy facilities. So they're basically big swimming pools in the future, and be much more cost effective and be usable for other commercial applications. Early days, but we will.
Wow. So yeah, I think for those like interesting scenarios that yeah, that feels like it's like mixed reality or VR really helps like an astronaut like imagine or like doing some training, and also helps us to kind of like grasp something, for example, like by putting someone directly to the space versus being trained first and then
Mm,
going there. I think they can get more immersive training and definitely help them to cope with like a future danger, and also like a really,
exactly.
yeah, because imagine I don't really know what's going on in the space, but I know there are a lot of like huge radiation, and also your bone or something will get affected by your entire body will get like, if things is not going well, people might got cancer or something. So I think for those simulation really helps.
Yeah, and I think even being able to carry out work on the space station. What happens if you don't tether yourself correctly and you suddenly find yourself floating away, and you have to
Wow.
get your buddy to come and rescue you? Um, or a lot of astronauts sometimes freeze when they see the Earth for the first time. So they come out of the hatch and they see the planet, and they suddenly realize it's down there.
Wow.
And sometimes they've been known to freeze. So again, there's various things you can do. Another good example, micrometeorites. What happens if your suit is punctured?
Mm,
You want to be able to rehearse what you need to do to stop your life support
mm,
disappearing.
yeah.
And there are so many different scenarios, both in space and on planets,
Mm,
future planetary exploration, that I think this concept
mm,
could actually not 100%,
yeah.
but certainly a good percentage of training requirements for the future.
Yeah, I think I remember I read a news that American, like the military commander, requires the soldiers to do some, I don't know, VR or AMR, XR types of game, military simulation game, like 20 times before going to the actual war zone. I think that, because, for example, when I saw people play Call of Duty or some military game, I saw like, oh, it's just entertaining. but it actually is a job simulation for
Yeah.
soldiers. It's a job.
Yes.
So yeah, so I think this is a very interesting thing. And I can see in the future, we will be in more like a game simulation world where gaming and the working probably will be the I would say synchronous or asynchronous types of training. So it's very interesting to see like from just a game to become a actual serious training for
Very
soldiers.
powerful. It's very. We did a project once where we used games technology
Mm.
to build a Middle Eastern village,
Wow.
but to put markers throughout that village,
Huh,
which would normally indicate there was a bomb there, an
huh,
improvised explosive device. And we got the soldiers to walk through the village
huh,
to see what they noticed.
huh.
And when they didn't notice them, we said, do you know why all those cigarettes are there? Do you know why there's a ribbon in the wall? And it's quite amazing because, but when they go into the real setting, because they played the game exactly what you said, because they played the game, something clicks, and they say, "Wait a minute, we had something like that happen in that game I played," and that makes them more aware. That
Yeah,
makes
right.
them much
And
more aware.
if you die in the game, it's just you play a game. But if you die in your real body, you'll just die and
That's
you
it.
won't come back. So I think just by keeping simulation, I think this really helps soldiers to understand what's the real danger since they
Yeah,
play in the game. Yeah,
yeah,
so I think this is a very interesting way of training.
yeah, absolutely. It's just exposing them to things that might happen, but in a way that's quite affordable to do, and in a way that's memorable.
Yeah, yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, so we can talk about like education. You mentioned that you teach students. I remember you mentioned like a 38 years, right, in your career. And pretty much I can tell you this year I'm 39. So pretty much my entire being is your education career. So
Yeah.
yeah, so um what do you see? What types of advice for the younger student who wanna, for example, I always heard of a lot of students said that how can I get a job
Yeah.
or how can I start with my career? And what's your advice for student, and especially right now AI? Recently, I saw AI agent. Pretty much, you just give a command and things will be done, like an app. And I saw Quark like three, you can ask Squawk to code I don't know, spaceship simulation to something.
Mm.
It's like super complicated things. So how can a beginner or like someone who just started how like when being given the tools, what do you see those beginners or like a student, how can they cope with their future career?
Well, I think it's very much the same in virtual reality as well. Is what I say to all of my students is obviously enjoy your experience and the projects that we do together. But the first thing I always tell them to do is to make their own portfolio. Do not just rely on what you learn in college or in the university. Get hold of software packages, Blender, Unity, Unreal, it doesn't matter. Get hold of these packages and develop your own scenarios.
Yeah,
Not just develop them. It's fine. I'm sure yes, you could put them on the website,
yeah,
but that doesn't tell people what you're capable of doing. So if you do develop the scenarios, then try them out on people. Try them out on your family. Try them out on if you can get into a care home or something. Just try to measure the impact of what you do, because that's when a portfolio becomes very, very attractive
yeah,
to employers, particularly in XR. I
yeah.
imagine, although as I said, it's not my area of expertise, I imagine the same is true of AI.
Hmm.
If you could develop an AI example that has real world meaning or
Hmm.
real world impact, then that's what should make your portfolio. Don't just rely on your essays.
Mm.
Don't just rely on your thesis.
Yeah.
Do something in your spare time. Okay, do students have spare time? Yeah, yeah.
I find
Sometimes.
out students are it's a very interesting job or occupation because it seems like they are study, right? But 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 for me, I think study should be a lifelong thing. It's not like just
Oh,
limited to student time.
yeah,
So
yeah.
student is like, oh, do I have spare time? Because they keep learning. It feels like for me, like work and learning is like a separate. So spare time means I'm learning. If your entire time is all learning, and what's the spare time?
Yeah, well, yes, and I think they have to make spare time at some stage. If they really want to, there are lots of students out there who want a job in AI, in quantum, in XR, and they really need to show themselves as being superior to everyone else. And that's why I say that this portfolio that you can present and
Mm,
show,
mm,
and a portfolio that's been evaluated
mm.
is so important. I mean, the example I gave you earlier, Elsa, the young student who came, she came to me, no VR experience, 3D experience, and by October, she had produced that mountain scene, integrated the David Attenborough, and she had become a virtual reality, I won't say expert, but I'm
It's
still
expert. If you
using
can
her
get
software.
if you can get David Attenborough to be in your project, I think you're an expert.
Well, yeah, yeah, we were very lucky, but I'm still using her software today. She did her project in 2008, 2018, maybe even 2016, but her work and all the extra effort she put in is still being used to change lives today. And I'm so proud of it. I really am so proud of what she did. And there are other
Wow.
students who have done projects that they've been able to use as examples when they go for interview.
Hmm.
And they've worked in. I mean, there's one guy went off to do virtual reality maintenance training for a massive oil platform, I think in Singapore.
Hmm.
And another guy went to Carnegie Mellon and developed a robot. So
Wow.
it can be done. It can be done. But you must have an enthusiastic student, and you must have an enthusiastic professor.
Wow. Yeah, I
I
think
hope.
for Bob, you show your enthusiastic for all the different areas, and I think you work with a lot of very interesting people and come up with very interesting project. And I think that's like the creativity comes from. It's just keep learning and keep growing and keep creating project that impacts the world. So the advice for younger generation is that create your own projects and then make impacts to the world and measure that impacts. Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be a huge project. It doesn't have to be an expensive project. As long as people can see that you've developed something and you've taken it out and exposed it to real people,
Yeah.
that's a start. That's a really good start. And that's
Yeah.
what I think that's what most students should be thinking of doing. Yes, they have to write essays and they have to write theses and they have to do all the exams and things, but just go that extra mile, as we say in the
Yeah.
UK, and it will pay off.
Yeah.
It will bring rewards.
Yeah, because for example, like a SS or quiz or just like a the coding or like a modeling animation, it's just a skill. And that skill, I usually think that for if we want to compete with AI for the skill set, we will feel frustrated. We will feel like what's my worth, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
yeah, because I recently coaching a group of students that I encourage them to use AI to assisting coding and also other art generation. And I think a student told me that I don't want to use AI. I enjoy the creative process. I enjoy the laboring. And for me, because my history was very different from them. I was more like I did lots of hard work before. I code before. I did all the preparation. I commit that I enjoy when I watch Netflix. I watch movies while doing those like a so-called labor work. But now it's like within 5 seconds, AI finish it, and it puts me upper another layer that I need to
Mm,
keep
mm,
giving myself or giving another stuff. Sometimes I feel like, but I rather doing things that no brand than I need to keep coming up with something.
absolutely.
Yeah, so I feel like wow, my brain actually get more burden by doing giving commands for AI than I do the actual things. So it's very interesting to see that a little bit resistant, but I don't know what do you think, and how open your student to use AI, or your student wanna um, like a uh, do something that AI already achieved and wanna keep grinding up the skills.
Well, I think the from what I understand, I mean, I've not supervised projects for some time now because of course I've officially retired. But I can certainly give you I can certainly give you something similar in my experience with students in XR because that's my area. And yeah, it's the students. Some students come to me and they say, "Okay, Professor Bob, I want to build this. And by the way, I can download these 3D models for off the web for maybe a few dollars or free, and I will put this together and I will show you. You can walk around it." No, that's no good. That's no good. I do not mind students using 3D models as long as they use those 3D models to tell their story. So they have to do something much more creative. And I think in that respect, XR is a bit more like AI. You can give the students the building blocks,
Mm,
whether it's code or whether it's a 3D model. But in terms of how they pull that together to make a story, to provide a tool that's giving advice, to provide a tool that takes them to the next level of coding,
mm,
or then I think that's where the creativity comes in. So it's not let AI do everything for us.
mm,
Let's use AI to provide us with the
mm,
foundations of what generative AI is actually very good at.
mm,
But then let them think a little bit horizontally
mm,
to make something unique with those
mm.
tools. So the
Yeah.
parallels between AI and XR, which I think are very, very important, but it is creativity. Nobody will take you on if all you've done is use 3D models and maybe textured them or put some material effects and produced a pretty picture.
Mm,
People will be more interested if you've taken some models and you've put them together
mm.
in a sequential fashion that tells a story that has impact. Same with
Yeah.
AI. Very much
Yeah.
the same with AI.
Yeah, so pretty much your thoughts is that students is not just doing some labor work, which is there's no uniqueness or
Hmm.
no like I think the right now the difference between human and machine is that human has its own unique experience,
Mm.
unique way of thinking. Everybody is different. So by kind of putting these types of unique thinking into the project, that makes the project unique than the generative AI. But if the student focusing on what generative AI can do, then a student kind of lose the opportunity to express himself or herself
Exactly. Yeah.
for the expression utilize the tools.
Yes. Yeah. And I think the human experience is a very valuable thing. I mean, I've changed many projects because of the projects I've done in the past, not just to not just to avoid errors, but also to bring something a little bit unique, giving the developers the option to try something different. And I
Mm.
think that's where humans, thank goodness, humans still have a role to play for now.
Yeah, yeah. I think yeah, the interesting thing right now is that I just start thinking that a lot of AI tools start taking over, and also a lot of XR tools. For example, before when coding, like a hand gesture, everything need to do a lot of, for example, learning documentation. But now, if you see Unity, you just plug in and click some building blocks, and it automatically assemble a lot
Mhm.
of basic stuff. So I usually start with that, and also they provide a lot of templates. I drag
Yeah,
and drop templates.
yeah,
However, there will be conflicts. I just need to start solving the problem. But the conflicts can be, for example, I just putting a lot of script insert into like ChatGPT, and then it will tell me what's the conflicts and how can I solve it. So this is the new way of me of working instead of trying to figure out the logic and code without
sure.
any assistance. So I
Yeah,
think it's
yeah.
faster. Yeah. Yeah. So as for your experience, your teaching and also project experience, do you have any other things that we didn't cover and you want to mention either to the XR creator or you want to share with the students, younger generation?
No, nothing's. We've covered a lot. We've covered a lot in this discussion. It's been very, very good, quite very enjoyable. I think the only thing that I would emphasize is the importance of understanding what you're, sorry, who you're designing for. So it's
Mm,
we see examples, on LinkedIn and online. I mean the integrated, was it the integrated visual augmentation system IVAS, which was that $22 billion Microsoft project for the great situational awareness, and that whole project has gone very, very bad indeed, simply
mm,
because even though they claim they involved soldiers, they didn't involve them from the start. And I
mm,
think it's important that you got to remember you're not just doing this for a degree.
mm,
You're not just doing this because it's fun to do. You're doing this because it's going to make a difference to somebody who will one day come along and use it
mm.
or benefit from it. So because my background, I'm not a programmer. I'm not an engineer. I'm a psychologist
Wow,
with human
interesting.
factors training.
Mm,
So my message always is, please think about the needs, the
mm.
capabilities, and the limitations of the people you're designing for.
Oh,
Do that first and get them involved regularly
mm,
throughout the project,
yeah,
and you can't go wrong. Well, you
yeah.
can, but you're less likely to go wrong if you remember the user, remember the real person doing real work in the real world.
This is also very similar to user experience design. Because,
Yep.
for example, like when I design, if I jump into a project, I would read all the user researcher. What types of like a interview or first hand? What's the user problem? What's user struggle with? What just like you said, what's the limitation of the user? And
Mm,
then look at the current system, what types of stuff that according to users feedback that can modify and make the users life better. And then I believe the design system or like the design philosophy, for example, like component, atomic, a lot of like a design theories come after. Like when we start organizing the file, we can definitely use that for engineer to start building up things according to the building blocks.
sure.
But
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that is at the end for execution. At the beginning, we need to jump into something that is more tied to human, and there is no right answer. The interesting thing is that I heard some people said that, oh, they are trying to simulate a couple people and make it AI, and then they wanna let AI to conduct the user research without human involved. I was questioning about that because I
Oh,
understand. Yeah, I remember that was Stanford or somebody's research. Right now, they are according to real humans' behavior, they collect everybody's like 100 or something, everybody's behavior, and they import into a system. And then, for example, if researcher wanna come up with the research, right? Before you need to do one-on-one, having a meeting, asking your problem. But now you just type your question inside probably chatbot, and you will come up conduct with the real human research. I don't know whether how it goes or the
mm,
behavior research, but it's not real human. I don't know how this goes, but I just want to mention that I think address what real humans probably my argument for this types of thing is that every time we think differently, for example, like a let's say the most recent news, like a shift of concept is political, right? You see Trump and Biden.
mm,
The entire I think the entire mainstream value becomes shift from more like a DEI, more like caring empathy to something so muscular and so profit driven. So
mm,
and
yes,
people's mindset will switch because of the big environment. And it's so hard to predict. As a human, we keep changing, and for that software, you just put my current data, and tomorrow or next year, I will become a different person.
that's right. That's
Yeah,
absolutely right.
my thoughts and you see like and there will be like a black swan or like a political I don't know like a economic change that nobody can predict. How
Hmm.
can you even put everybody's data and put in the software and claim that you don't have to talk to real human? You can just type a chatbot and the really 100% accurate report will come out. I don't know,
Mm.
that's just my thought.
No, no, I agree with you. I agree with you. The way I think about something now will be different tomorrow
Yeah.
because we evolve on a daily basis, sometimes an hourly basis, because how our experience gets us to tackle a particular problem,
Mm,
typically based on what's gone before. And
mm,
sometimes that doesn't work because the technology is new,
mm,
or the politics are new, or
mm,
the economics are new,
mm.
and so your response will be completely different and, in the main, unpredictable.
Hmm. Yeah. So I don't know. I think right now science is trying to control the unpredictable things and make it predictable. And it reminds me of Minority Reports. Remember that
Yes.
the future of AI is trying to predict somebody will commit crime in the
Yeah.
future and start trying to kill that person. I don't know, it all comes back to more like a sci-fi thing. Can we really predict humans behavior? Can we I don't know. And right now human robot and recently I saw there was a news that Uber has already upgraded. There was a new perk which you can pay like 1 to 2,000 USD dollars and get a super luxurious car with a person with a gun to protect you. So yeah,
Really?
yeah. I saw the news. You can check. So it's interesting. They are going that way, but I can predict in the future. Maybe it's not a human with a gun to be your guardian. It will be robots with a
Oh yeah.
gun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and and it's interesting to discuss if there's, for example, in the future, policemen become a robot. And if that policeman kills somebody, and there might be something that back and forth, like is for example, if the robot did something wrong, like who will take the responsibility? Yeah, I don't know. It's just
No.
back and forth about the prediction of human behavior, and something predict you is AI, and AI was not perfect. So yeah,
It's
cool.
it's I may not be here to see the ultimate result, but I've enjoyed the time I've had. So let's hope they don't mess everything up.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for the conversation, and thank you so much for being here. We learned a lot about like the your project about like a military and also like interesting things, for example, climate change, and also you and your a student come up with project, and your student come up with projects like I would say make a lot of impacts to the world. And also, I really appreciate you give like the advice to our audience, especially the young audience, create the project that makes impacts instead of just downloading some prepackaged and follow like be a mediocre
Yeah,
developer just trying to show off the skills. So
absolutely.
yeah, so yeah, that's it for this episode. Thank you for listening. We release episodes weekly. If you enjoy this conversation, check out our other episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Support us by giving us a follow and 5-star rating, or subscribe our channel and give this video a like. Thank you and see you next time.